Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the September Ordinary Council meeting, M10 2020. Could I remind my fellow councillors, if you're not speaking, to put your microphones on mute, please. Thank you. Over to you, Charlie, please, for the preliminaries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All council meetings are filmed with both video and audio being recorded. This meeting is being held online and audio and video is focused on councillors and officers. Question time is still being held. However, questions must be submitted in writing prior to the meeting, and by submitting a question, you consent to your question being read aloud and recorded. In common with all narrative during council meeting, verbal responses to congratulations, obituaries and question time will not be recorded in the written minutes. The reasoning behind recording council meetings is, of course, to hold us more accountable and improve transparency of council's decision-making to our community. The full meeting is being streamed live on council's YouTube channel, which is Alpine Shire Council, and will also be available on the YouTube channel shortly after this meeting.
Acknowledgement of traditional custodians and recognition of all people.
The Alpine Shire Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we are all on. We also acknowledge those people who have contributed to the rich fabric of our community and strive to make wise decisions that will improve the quality of life for all.
Confirmation of minutes, of which we have 3. Ordinary Council meeting M7, 7th July 2020, M8, 4th of August 2020, and the special meeting on SPM 9, 25th of August 2020. So the recommendation is the minutes of the ordinary council meetings, the 3 council meetings, let's roll them all into one. Could I have a mover and seconder, please?
So moved.
Councillor Napstein, Councillor Nicholas. All those in favour? Carried. Apologies, of which we have none. Obituaries and congratulations. Raise your hand. Councillor Napstein.
I have an obituary first. Brian Elvish, locally known artist and long-term resident, and a little bit grumpy sometimes. Did some wonderful artworks, and both commercially and in the art gallery. We sadly lost him this week. And you can see his work on the Leaning Tower of Pisa, outside the Blanche Ice Creamery. And congratulations to the new CEO of Alpine Health, Nick Swan.
Any further? Councillor Pearce, you're on mute, Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, thank you, Kitty, for your nice words for Brian Elvish. What a well-respected and lovely bloke to have in your community over many years. He was 73 years old when he passed, and as Kitty mentioned, he was a good artist that did a lot of painting, and it was always painting here and there. He was a great assistant and officer within the Pride Football Club, and in fact I think he played a game when he was about 53 that I was in, and he was just a lovely person to have about. And goodbye, Brian, we love you.
Any further?
Just a point of clarification, please, Mr. Councillor Roper, and that is, Kitty, the new CEO is Nick Shaw.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Mr. CEO, can we organise a letter to the new CEO of Alpine Health, wishing them well on their new position?
Sure.
If there's no further obituaries and congratulations, we'll go to declarations by councillors of conflict of interest. Is anyone a conflict of interest?
Yes, Councillor Keeble here. I have a conflict of interest, Mr. Mayor, on 8.3.9, the planning application 5.2018.138.1.
When we get to that item, Mr. Bird, can you put Councillor Keeble into the waiting room? And when we've considered that meeting, considered that item and voted, we'll bring him back into the meeting. Public questions, of which we have some. Bear with me. The first question we have is from Ms. Farrell, Kate Farrell from Wandillagong, and I will read the question. She requests that we read her questions in full, so I'll read the question as is written in front of me. Question 1, how many new homes and accommodation properties been built in the Alpine Shire since 2010? Question 2, how much more rate revenue have all the new properties combined brought into the Alpine Shire of this 10-year period, and where has been the biggest growth of new dwellings been? Ms. Cook, can you please respond to that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Across the Shire, in the 10 years question, there have been 826 dwellings built. However, this number includes buildings which are considered change of use and required a building permit, and also includes buildings in all locations and across all rating categories. So that means farming, commercial, industrial, as well as residential. Our data does not allow us to easily extract out new homes, and definitely does not allow us to separately extract out the building of accommodation properties separately. With regard to the second question, how much more rate revenue? Unfortunately, we're unable to calculate this number in the way that it has been requested. The calculation would require us to pull each rating assessment and manually review it and categorise it, and would take additional significant resourcing to extract each rate's bill and then assess them as whether they're a new dwelling over the last 10 years and to map location. I'm sorry.
Ms. Cook, Councillor Janice asked a relevant question previously as to how much time and effort this has taken for you to get that information to answer Ms. Farrell's question. Can you give us a rough estimation of the cost to respond to that question of Ms. Farrell's?
We did get quite a lot of notice on this question, and we did genuinely try to calculate the rate revenue component particularly. There were four officers in different departments working on the answer. It would have taken about half a day, I believe. So.
Thank you very much. The second question we have on notice is reasonably more generic, of which we have two. Basically, I am going, because it goes over 2 pages. We have Melanie Leonard has written about a house they purchased 3 years ago in Bright, and she has received a rates notice and has been unable to get any short stay accommodation for her house, and is complaining about the rate that she is paying because it is sometimes let, and she hasn't been able to. That is a short synopsis of the letter. Could you please respond to that letter, Ms. Cook?
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. My understanding of the issues outlined in the letter is that the request is that Council repeals the application of the commercial industrial rate definition to apply to short-term holiday accommodation. As per Council's commercial industrial differential rate policy, which was adopted in the 2020 and 21 budget, the objective of the policy states that it is to ensure equity in the application of the rating burden across the Shire. It provides for higher cost of servicing commercial and industrial properties, special properties, and undertaking economic development and tourism strategies. Council plays a substantial supporting role in the development and promotion of tourism and events across the Alpine Shire, and a significant proportion of the money raised by this differential rate goes towards that purpose. As short-term accommodation providers are key beneficiaries of the local tourism industry, that is why they are included in the scope of the differential commercial and industrial rate. This is in line with an approach which is adopted by a number of councils, and the differential rate is raised in line with the requirements of the Local Government Act. I do understand, however, or we do understand that many commercial businesses, so this is all commercial businesses as well as those who are undertaking short-term accommodation services, are facing severe financial challenges as a result of the summer bushfires and COVID-19 pandemic. I think it should also be pointed out that a number of our residential properties and residential homeowners are also suffering severe financial challenges at the moment. To this end, for the commercial properties, however, we've provided a waiver of 25% of the annual rates in the fourth quarter of the last financial year to all commercial industrial properties, which included short stay accommodation providers. To provide further assistance, we've also extended the interest-free period on rates from what was the 30th of June to the 30th of September to provide short-term financial hardship relief and to allow for further flexibility with payments. There are no further rates waivers being extended. However, our customer service staff are more than happy to discuss further interest-free extensions. This is for all ratepayers, not just commercial properties. So this is for our residential ratepayers as well. And all the possibility of extending a rate payment plan to enable people to spread payments over a suitable period of time. In the meantime, particularly for commercial properties, we would also recommend contacting the Alpine Recovery Hub. Contact details are available on our webpage. They may be able to assist further with identifying available other relief, such as the Regional Tourism Accommodation Support Program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. We will organise to have a response sent to Ms. Leonard via email, I presume.
Yes, we will respond in writing as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Presentation of reports by officers. 8.1, Chief Executive Officer, Mr. Bird.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item relates to contracts approved by the CEO. There are two there. One for the Mount Beauty Concrete Path Construction Works, which is awarded to McPherson's Earth Moving. The second one for Landfill Consulting Services to SMAC.
Good mover and seconder, please. Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Epstein. All those in favour?
Yep.
Carried. 8.1.2, Mr. Baird.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to Momentum One Shared Services. And the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the entity and also for council known as annual financial reports for the 2016-17, 17-18 and 18-19 years. So Momentum One Shared Services was established by Alpine Shire Council and Towong Shire Council back in 2015 under the entrepreneurial powers of the Local Government Act. And it was established as a way to deliver the benefits of a shared services to each of the shareholder councils as well as other councils. It achieves this through the use of technology solutions, streamlined administrative overheads, and achieving economies of scale. Momentum One has been able to assist its partner councils to reduce service delivery costs through employment management solutions. So since 2015, Momentum One has placed about 450 team members with 8 partner councils. And it's particularly well suited to, it's a labour hire model, it's particularly well suited to seasonal pools where it provides a cost-effective seasonal workforce with reduced administrative overheads. So there are 2 directors that sit on Momentum One, each being each council CEO from Towong Shire and Alpine Shire Council, and each of these director roles are unpaid. Momentum One is licensed with the Victorian Labour Hire Authority as required since May 2020, and it has its own public liability, professional indemnity, and other associated insurances. It is recommended that council.
So moved.
Councillor Janus.
Second.
Councillor Epstein. Councillor Janus, would you like to speak?
Just briefly, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that this company, which we are involved in conjunction with Towong Shire, has been audited by the Victorian Auditor General's Office on all the reports, and there have been no issues from the Auditor General's Office in relation to the running of this company. I'm satisfied that the company is being running well and in conjunction with all laws of the state and the country, and in so doing has also achieved a savings for our ratepayers. Thank you.
Councillor Epstein.
No, I think Councillor Janus has covered that one. Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Pearce.
Yeah, someone in the street the other day asked me if I let finished as a councillor. Could I get a job on the council? I said, I don't think so. I'm not sure for how long. But then I was thinking along the same lines as, can a councillor finish as a councillor and go straight into a job with Momentum One?
It's a very good question, Councillor Pearce, and one I need to take on notice. I need to understand the close association between Momentum One and the Alpine Shire Council.
And while you're there, could I get a job with Brian? If I couldn't, could I get a job with Towong or any of the other shire that's involved with Momentum One? Thanks, CEO.
Looking forward to seeing you as a pool attendant somewhere, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Forsyth.
Just wondering if Councillor Pearce has his life-saving certificate on him or not.
I'm sure.
Two observations. Firstly, because of the nature of Momentum One, and I'm assuming, Mr. Bird, that there does not have to be a provision for leave or for any of those things that have just come through in the latest industrial relations findings in the courts, or that are going through the courts at the moment. That's the first question, I suppose. The second question is dividends. Has Momentum One paid a dividend to either of the owners yet?
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. So in relation to your first question, employees for the seasonal pools are casual staff, and they are the pool season runs for less than 6 months, so it's not affected by any of those matters which are being discussed at the Fair Work Commission. In relation to your second question, has a dividend been paid to the two shareholders, being Alpine Shire and Towong Shire? And the answer to that is no. Momentum One has chosen to retain its earnings at this point in time. When it believes it's appropriate, then it will provide a dividend to its shareholders.
Any further questions?
Just a follow up on that. Is there any point in time that you would see, or is there a projected point in time when any initial capital is put into Momentum One will be paid back to the two shires?
Yeah, I don't have that indicative timeline. Again, I need to take that one on notice.
Councillor Pearce, can you hit mute, please? We're all ready for the vote. All those in favour of the vote point 1.2 recommendation? Carried. 8.2, Director of Assets, Mr. William Jeremy, Dinner Plain Event Funding Program.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the recommended distribution of funding to support events in Dinner Plain for the 2020-21 financial year. Recommendations for funding support a mixture of event types which are spread over the year. These include existing successful events and events which are designed to attract visitation by targeting the key school holiday and public holiday periods. The only external funding application received this year was from new event organisers of the Sled Dog Challenge. 8 events we've recommended for funding have been proposed by Alpine Shire Council as a means of supporting the Dinner Plain economy. Council officers will seek expressions of interest from experienced event organisers in order to deliver these events as we've identified in the table in the recommendation. The document contains an allocation of $50,000 for events in Dinner Plain. Total recommendation for funding is for $48,700 worth of funding. That includes $10,000 for the Sled Dog event, which is split over 2 financial years. So that's $5,000 in the 2021 financial year and $5,000 the following year. So that means that the total funding is $43,700, leaving a residual for the 2021 financial year of $6,300. So the recommendation is that we allocate financial sponsorship as outlined in the report that is in front of you. We note that financial sponsorship will not be provided to event organisers unless government restrictions limiting gatherings as a result of COVID are lifted, and the event organiser has provided all required documentation to Council, including a risk management plan addressing measures to minimise the transmission of COVID-19. And we request that Council delegates authority to the CEO to distribute the residual or the unspent funds to a cumulative total of $50,000.
So moved.
Councillor Keeble.
Okay.
Councillor Pearce.
I'm trying to. I'm just keeping on being muted.
Hang on, Councillor Keeble. We've got a move as Councillor Keeble, second is Councillor Pearce. Sorry. Councillor Keeble.
It's great to see the events at Dinner Plain. We all hope in the next few weeks we'll find out whether some of these events will continue regarding the Victorian restrictions and COVID-19.
Councillor Pearce? You're on mute, Councillor Pearce. I still can't hear you, Councillor Pearce.
On and on. Well said, Tone, and it's all pretty straightforward there, and let's hope weather and all the other hurdles don't interfere.
Councillor Nicholas?
I was just going to second it or move it. That's fine. I
Okay,
only said everything I was going to say.
Yep.
Just a note, if I could, please, Mr. Mayor.
Yep.
Just a clarification that the monies being spent at Dinner Plain are, in fact, monies that have been collected through Dinner Plain special rate and are not coming out of our normal grants program.
Mr. Jeremy?
Could I defer that one across to Natalie Cook to respond, if that's possible?
It certainly is. Ms.
Sorry,
Cook?
Councillor Janice, could you repeat the question, please?
That the funding for these events is being it comes out of the monies that are collected from the Dinner Plain residents through their special rate. It's not coming out of our general rate fund from Alpine Shire. This is all Dinner Plain money that through their special rate.
So it doesn't really work that way. So when the special rate is raised, it is the equivalent of the commercial industrial rate across the rest of the Shire, and it goes into our general revenue stream. So the special rate comes into the general revenue stream. The way the special rate is calculated, however, includes a number of functions which are a special benefit to those businesses within Dinner Plain. And one of those is events, yes. So one of those goes into the calculation for the special rate calculation.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions of Ms. Cook about where the money comes from? No further questions. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.2.2, the Dinner Plain bus, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report details a recommendation to extend the existing contract with Alpine Spirit to operate the service for the 2021 ski season. The bus service between Dinner Plain and Mount Hotham is an integral part of the success of the winter tourist season. It enables both residents and visitors with public transport to access activities at Mount Hotham, as well as providing Mount Hotham residents and visitors with public transport across the Dinner Plain. Contract 1707-301 was awarded to Alpine Spirit to operate the service for the 2018, the 2019 and the 2020 ski seasons. However, as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic impacting on the operations of the Mount Hotham ski season, Alpine Spirit was unable to successfully complete the final year of the existing contract. The service was only able to operate 2 weeks out of a usual 17-week ski season. Alpine Spirit has requested that Council consider a further 1-year term to the existing contract to operate a service for the 2021 ski season.
I'll move that.
I'll second it.
Councillor Janice, Councillor Forsyth.
I think it might have been Councillor Nicholas, Mr. Mayor.
Was it?
Seconded.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, so Councillor Nicholas is second. I will refresh. Councillor Janice move, Councillor Nicholas second. Councillor Janice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know it is difficult at times. Look, this we have discussed this previously. It has been a very difficult year for all business operators, particularly throughout the whole of the Alpine Shire and up in those ski fields where it's been really difficult to operate. We've had nothing but positive reports in relation to this service being provided by Alpine Spirit coaches. And I think they have put in a lot of money to spent on capital for those coaches and for the comfort of our people using that service. And I think in the circumstances, it would be fair to extend it for that further year.
Councillor Nicholas.
Nothing more to add. Very well said, Councillor Janice.
Councillor Pearce, I can see you're.
One of the questions I've had last year, out of the possible 17 weeks or whatever it was, they only, due to COVID or due to whatever, could only open for 15 of the 17 weeks. I don't know if I'm exactly right on those figures, but what did it cost us for those 2 weeks that they operated in the last year?
Ms. Cook, can you answer that question?
That's sitting with me, Mr. Mayor. That would sit with me, but I would have to take that one on notice. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it cost us to run the service for those 2 weeks.
Does anyone know off the top of their head? No. Thank you, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you. I'll wait.
Are there any further questions about the dinner plane bus? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. An extension. 8.2.3 Mount Beauty Airport upgrade, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to brief Council on the status of the Mount Beauty Airport upgrade project and to highlight likely changes in the scope of the upgrade since submission of the funding application. So as background, the Alpine Planning Scheme Amendment C38 was gazetted in March 2017 after more than 10 years of planning facilitating an upgrade to the Mount Beauty Airport, and it also allowed for the development of the air park facilities, which have direct access to the runway. So in 2019, we got an opportunity to apply for significant Australian government funding to progress the upgrade, which had been foreshadowed in that planning scheme amendment back in 2017. The window of opportunity we had to prepare and submit the application was short. We engaged the services of an external consultant to help us prepare the documentation which was required to support our funding application. At the special council meeting on the 3rd of December, council authorised that submission for a grant application with a council commitment of no more than $1.6 million, and we subsequently submitted the application in mid-December. We found out in mid-June, 13th of June, we learned that our application had been successful and we've been allocated $1,555,910 of funding for the Mount Beauty Airport upgrade. Following the funding announcement, we were working through a process to get ready to finalise the grant funding agreement, and we identified a number of discrepancies between the content of the funding application that we'd submitted to the government and some of the early master planning report that was done from 2011 onwards. The nature of these discrepancies was such that it called into question some of the key components of the scope that we'd put forward in the funding application to the federal government. And it caused us to have a review of the scope for that project. So we've been back to the Australian government. Once we learned that there were some discrepancies and that they were potentially significant, we flagged this to the Australian government who's allocated the funding. And we sought their approval to essentially review, revise and resubmit the scope for their consideration. So that's the process we've been going through over the last 2 months. We've engaged an external specialist consultant who worked on airfield design. And that airfield consultant has been reviewing all the background documentation from 2011 onwards, including our funding application. They've got survey data for the airfield, and they've been essentially going through and establishing what are the priority upgrades at the Mount Beauty Airfield in consultation with the emergency services. I've outlined in the report that I've presented to you a comparison of the funding application and what the revised concept is looking at the moment. The work on the revised concept is still ongoing, and we were keen to present this to council before we headed into a caretaker period. And in the subsequent weeks, we'll be submitting a revised scope with your support, a revised scope back to the funding body to hopefully wrap up the grant funding agreement.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Nicholas and Councillor Keeble. Councillor Nicholas, you finally got one.
Yeah, got him first, just like bingo. Great work. It just shows how nimble and responsive the Alpine Shire is when there's a funding opportunity in front of us. But this one in particular has needed some adjustment. I've got a question, Mr. Jeremy, about there won't be runway lighting permanently installed under the revised concept. Does that mean that the Mount Beauty Gliding Club will continue to be able to winch launch in the area?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. You've touched on one of the key challenges we had with the proposal as submitted was the installation of the runway lighting, which protrudes up from the surface of the runway, presented some significant challenges to the ongoing operation of the gliding club in that location. So the gliding club used tow launching, and that did present some challenges. My understanding is that with the removal of the runway lighting from the scope of work, that essentially eliminates that problem which would have caused a challenge for the ongoing gliding operations.
Thank you.
Councillor Keeble.
Thank you. Bill, thanks to your team. I know you've come into the extension of the runway at Mount Beauty late, considering it's been going on for a long time, even before 2011. I think, I think maybe 2004 or 2006 it was first floated as an extension. It's been great to see, and Sarah pointed out about the Shire being nimble and flexible. And I think you've done a great job listening to the voices of the people in the area who had concerns about the scope of works. And I know that there have been quite a few people put in their thoughts about the scope of work. So I thank them also, because that alerted us to what looked like a potential issue, which then we followed through. So well done on that. And looking at the revised concepts, and knowing that there's still a bit of work to do and some of that, but we're well on the way. So I think it's a really good outcome, and the fact that the Australian government and that you've had that conversation with them are open to the funding once they have a look at the revised scope. So I think that's great. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. Any further? Councillor Pearce in the background. You're on mute, Councillor Pearce. Turn your mute off, Councillor Pearce.
Good. I'm glad I had it on. Look, it's turned out pretty good. This, we didn't get, as I said the other day, we didn't get the runway lights or the obstacle lighting or the navigation lights, which really, for Mount Beauty Airport, they can't really use them there anyway. So what happened from there on in is all of a sudden we've got rid of the fancy stuff, and we've still got the money that allows us to really put some effort into the airport itself with aprons and fancy a bit of it up, and also to give the air park an opportunity to appear. I think we're pretty lucky, and I think it's all been pretty well handled too by Will, and I congratulate the whole team, because it's a pretty sticky effort and a hard job to try and deal with all those lighting, etc. problems, and then come out with the result you have. I think it's fantastic.
Councillor Pearce, what should be noted is a ex-aircraft controller and also holder of a private and commercial pilot's licence, or was. Councillor Janus.
Potential.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I listened to what Councillor Pearce has said and his expertise in this field. On a local level, I have been contacted by a community member over there who's also a landholder, and I think I need to put it on record that the airfield consultant that we currently are using, that has been engaged by council, has been doing a very good job with the landholders and stakeholders to get a good outcome for the community at Mount Beauty and those people using that facility, hopefully into the future. I just wanted to say that as a positive thing for the project, even that, we're spending a lot of money over there, but when we look at it strategically in the long term, this is going to be of great benefit for the Kiowa Valley and Mount Beauty people.
All of Alpine Shire, I'd say. Councillor Bird. No, CEO Bird, sorry. Charlie, sorry.
That's apology accepted. It's okay, Mr. Mayor. Just a point of clarification, Councillor Janus, that the person you're referring to is an employee with Alpine Shire Council.
Any further to the vote? All those in favour?
Mr. Jeremy had something to say, but anyway.
Oh, it's
Will had something to say.
Sorry, Mr. Jeremy.
Mayor, if I could I just clarify? So the Australian government has agreed to receive a revised scope and to discuss that with us. They haven't yet confirmed that the funding will apply to that new scope. So there still remains a small risk that the funding isn't secured. We think it's a small risk. The engagement with the Australian government has been positive, but I just want to flag that before we move forward.
Thank you. All those in favour? Carried. 8.2.4 Asphalt Overlay Contract, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the award of the Asphalt Overlay tender. Council undertakes asphalt overlaying every year as part of the Local Roads Renewal Programme. This year, the Asphalt Overlay Programme is based in the Kiewa Valley. It'll be carried out in Mount Beauty, Toowoomba South and Toowoomba. We undertake asphalt overlay each year by a process of overlaying existing spray seal with asphalt to prolong the life of selected road segments. And these segments are typically court bowls and car parks, which have a higher wear from higher traffic volume or for turning movements in those locations. So we went out to a public tender. We evaluated the tenders that came in, and we essentially ranked each of those submissions according to the tender criteria. The highest scoring tenderer in that submission process, as I've outlined in the report that I've presented to you, they're based in Melbourne, and they're within a stage 4 lockdown area. Now, at the time that we put the council report recommendation together, we weren't confident in a recommendation to the highest ranking tenderer because of the basis that they were in a stage 4 restriction zone, and because of concern that we wouldn't be able to deliver the asphalt overlay program without impacting on the timing of the reseals. So the recommendation that's actually in front of you today is award to the second ranked tenderer. However, subsequent to putting this report together, we've had a lot more engagement with the recommended tenderer, so the #1 ranking through the recommendation process. We've specifically focused on the measures and the provisions that they have in place to manage the risk of COVID transmission. And the contractor has done a very good job of providing us information to give us confidence that they firstly understand the risk of COVID transmission, and secondly have very robust measures in place to manage this risk of transmission. The second thing we've done since this report was put together was to do a bit more work around the mitigation in the event that the stage 4 restrictions were to continue, and that the asphalt program would be delayed and potentially impact on the reseals. Under that scenario, our proposal would be to defer the asphalt program by 12 months and deliver it in the subsequent financial year. So where I'm heading with this is that the recommendation that I'd like to put to council is different from the recommendation that's in the report in front of you. I'd like to put a recommendation that we award to the highest ranked tenderer in that evaluation process. So that is the tenderer that's based in the Melbourne area, which is in a stage 4 lockdown at the moment. And that we deliver the asphalt overlay works once the stage 4 restrictions are lifted. And that tender is then able to travel up to Alpine Shire, and they'd still apply their COVID safe plan, but they would no longer be traveling out of a stage 4 zone. In the event that the stage 4 restrictions continue, we would propose that the asphalt overlay works are deferred by 12 months rather than deferring the ceiling works. So the recommendation that I'd like to put to council, an alternative recommendation, is that the CEO awards the Asphalt Overlay 2021 contract under delegation. And the reason for that recommendation is that the award price for the highest ranking tenderer falls well within the delegation of the Alpine Shire Council CEO.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Keeble.
Thanks, Will, for your explanation there. I know we've had lots of discussions about this, and I know that, you know, our community members and ourselves as councillors and council officers, you know, we're making sure that the health of our shire and our ratepayers, our residents is at the utmost and foremost. So the fact that you've come to a different recommendation based on that as well, because we, you know, it's not right for people to travel out of a stage 4 lockdown. They're not allowed to. So I think that the fact that this has been moved for another 12 months and the CEO has delegation because it's under the threshold, I'm comfortable with that. I know that we always try and do local contracts whenever we can, and I know we've looked at the particular process, and so I know that this particular organisation that you're recommending will do the right work. So I'm happy to put my hand up for the motion.
Councillor Forsyth.
Look, just reiterating what Councillor Keeble has said, and I just think that congratulations to Will and your team for going that extra mile in this instance, and you've saved the ratepayers a fair whack of dough, I think. Thank you.
Any further comment? Councillor Pearce. You're on mute, Councillor Pearce. Unmute yourself, Councillor Pearce.
I'm a bit confused, taking notes there. What are we voting for? Are we voting, which contractor are we voting for here?
We're voting for the one that received the highest rank, which is the one that's which is what the conversation was about at the briefing session, which I think was Prestige Asphalt, if that's correct.
You're the cheaper one, the 104,000 or thereabouts.
Correct. Yep, correct.
So we're voting for them to get good. Thank you. That's all.
So we haven't got
Prestige Paving.
Prestige
Paving, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
I had a question too, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nicholas, you got?
Yeah, a question. I was just wondering how long the work is likely to take once they get going.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Their programme they put forward is a 2-week programme.
Nothing.
Thank you.
Any further? Councillor Forsyth?
Yeah, just one thing on that. What we're actually voting on, I believe, is that we're leaving this to the delegation of the CEO.
Correct. And as such, the decision matrix, exactly, because the amounts under the CEO's delegation, it should fall to the CEO.
Yes.
And but we reason it was in as an agenda item was because we weren't going to, officers weren't going to recommend the highest scoring tenderer, though, because of concerns about perhaps the highest scoring tenderer putting our communities at risk. But now that the further, exactly, and I think Mr. Jeremy's explained that he's confident that the tenderers are capable enough. Is there any further conversation? Councillor Keeble?
I see. Oh no, I'll ask my question. It's probably worth Will Jeremy reading out his recommendation again so that Councillor Pearce and the rest of us can hear that again, because it's different to what's on the paper.
Correct. Mr. Jeremy, do you mind reading your alternate recommendation, please?
So the recommendation is that the CEO awards the Asphalt Overlay 2021 contract under delegation.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce, I saw you waving your pencil around.
Yeah, I'm just on that. I'm just wondering. So Charlie can sit on this and change his mind at any moment to go to and fro to the other contractors that were bidding, or what's the case there? Thanks, Charlie.
Well, I would suggest that it would be very difficult for the CEO not to choose the highest ranking contractor. If you did so want to, it'd be probably against our purchasing regulations, and it'd probably have to come back to council again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, CEO.
Any further? To the vote, all those in favour? Carried. 8.2.5 reseals, Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to the award of the resealing 2021 spray seal tender. The council undertakes road resealing each year as part of its local roads renewal programme. The 2021 resealing programme is based in the Kiewa Valley. Resealing will be carried out in Mount Beauty, Toowoomba South, Toowoomba, Coral Bank, Gundowring, Upper Gundowring, Dedorang and Glen Creek. The list of roads to be resealed is compiled from the annual Seal Road Condition Inspection Programme, and a total area of approximately 71,000 square metres, which is 11 kilometres in length, is scheduled to be resealed this year. There's a full public tender process advertised in the Herald Sun and on our website. We received 5 conforming tenders and carried out an evaluation, and the recommendation.
I'll move that.
Second.
Councillors Forsyth and Pearce. Councillor Forsyth.
Look, simply following along from 8.2.4, I believe that the engineering department here at Alpine Shire have done a damn good job, and they've got probably the best tender that they can get.
Councillor Pearce,
I couldn't said it better myself. Thank you, Councillor Forsyth.
any further?
I have a comment, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Keeble,
It's great to see that the resealing program is it's a whole Shire approach, which it should be, and that by having the resealing concentrated in one area each year helps us to cut down on costs, but it's not about the cost, it's actually getting more done for the money we're paying. So people will see this year that it's all in the Kiwa Valley. Next year it'll be in the Ovens Valley, either the lower Ovens or upper Ovens. And so every 3 years, depending on what roads need to be done in regards to the resealing, that's where it happens. So sometimes for the ratepayers out there, you might see you don't see anything in your local road for 2 or 3 years. That's because it's done on a rotational basis. Unless next year it's Kiwa Valley's turn to get the resealing. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
any further?
Yeah, Sarah, Councillor Nicholas here. I have a question of Mr. Jeremy. Mr. Jeremy, could you let us know how the roads are assessed and how we know that it's that 11 kilometres that have priority, please?
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. So we have experienced resources within our team who actually do so firstly, they do a screen from the data that we hold in our asset database, which tells us the age and other data around the condition of our roads. At the last inspection, we produce a short list of roads which we consider might require resealing, and then every one of those roads is visually inspected by one of our engineers to verify the condition of that road and where it sits on the scale. So every one of the roads that we reseal this year will have been inspected and its condition assessed as requiring reseal as part of the programme. And that's done by our specialist internal resources.
Thank you. So we do get good value for money.
Can I ask a question further to Councillor Nicholas's question of Will?
Yes, Councillor Napstein.
Okay, we're talking about resealing, and just as a further to that, on sealing roads, do we do the same? Do we prioritise?
Slightly unclear on the question, Councillor Napstein. So we're talking about the sealing of roads, so essentially the waterproofing layer that we apply to the roads to prolong their life, the resealing.
Oh, okay, the resealing. My question was just on unsealed roads, but I guess that's another matter.
If I may respond to that one, Councillor Napstein, we don't have a road sealing program like we do with a road resealing program.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
And there's a process we follow through there, which is separate to this.
Thank you.
Considering those roads.
Any further? We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.2.7, Community Bushfire Recovery Grants Program. Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this report relates to the allocation of funding under the Community Bushfire Recovery Grant Funding Programme. So in Council's 2021 budget, we have 420,000 of state government bushfire funding allocated for community-led initiatives. So 20,000 of that has already been allocated through Council's normal community grants programme, and that leaves a balance of $400,000 to be allocated through a proposed Community Bushfire Recovery Grants Programme. And I've outlined some details in the council report of the process. It's a two-stage process we're proposing in consultation with the Community Recovery Committee. That's an expression of interest stage for people to put forward their proposals. Those proposals will be assessed by the Community Recovery Committee, and the committee will then establish which ones are suitable for moving forward into a detailed proposal. So the reason for this council report is that we foresee a scenario where some of those proposals which are put forward at the expression of interest stage are sufficiently detailed that they would warrant potentially allocation of funding without having to go through a second, more detailed funding round. And if we were to wait for all the other proposals to deliver their detailed funding and to bring it to a council meeting, which would likely not be until December, potentially we have community groups that have proposals that are ready to move. The community is ready. They've identified them as priorities for recovery funding, yet we're telling them that they need to wait potentially up to 2 months in order to get funding. So what we're seeking today is delegation of authority to the CEO to approve the allocations of funds through the Community Bushfire Recovery Grants Programme, as recommended by the Alpine Community Recovery Committee. And the reason we're requesting that today is because essentially we're heading into a council election period, and there'll be a period within which the councillors will not be able to make a decision to grant this funding. So we're seeking to allow the CEO to delegate to.
Forsyth.
In second.
Second that.
Councillor Keeble.
I think this is a very good outcome in this instance, delegating to the CEO. Look, let's face it, this funding has come through from a government source. It's not our own funds. It's just going to get handed back out to the community. Having this Community Bushfire Recovery Committee in place, it's community-based, and this is quite expedient, and it actually cuts out a fair bit of the red tape that is required in other instances. So I think it's a good outcome.
Councillor Keeble.
Yep, thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, well said, Councillor Forsyth. I think it's about the red tape, cutting the red tape and getting the funds out there as quickly as we can. And I've got full faith in the Community Recovery Committee and the CEO to make the delegation.
Any further to the vote? All those in favour? Carried. 8.3, Ms. Cook, Director Corporate. 8.3.1, Instruments of Delegation. Looks like a very, very, very interesting subject, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to update Council's instrument of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer and to staff to align to the Local Government Act 2020. The instrument of delegation to the CEO allows for appropriate delegation of Council's powers, duties and functions directly to the CEO and to staff. Where legislation allows it, the CEO can then further sub-delegate these duties to a member of Council staff. The instruments come into force immediately after the Common Seal of Council is affixed and will remain in force until Council determines to vary or revoke them. The recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll move the recommendation, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Janis.
Second.
Councillor Forsyth.
This is an administrative type recommendation on the operational side to bring us in line with the new Local Government Act 2020, and these things have to be in place for that for our staff to enable that act. I certainly am not going to read the full recommendation. Councillors, I'm sure you have that all in front of you in your briefing notes. And as I said, it's an administration type recommendation. That's it.
Any further? All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.2, Ms. Cook, which is, let me get to it. Instruments of Appointment and Authorisation, Planning Environment Act, another very exciting topic.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Instruments of appointment and authorisation are an important means of Council ensuring that its officers are appropriately authorised under the relevant acts that Council administers. This report provides for a change in staffing to enable staffing that have planning responsibilities, as well as the changes introduced by the introduction of the Local Government Act 2020. The recommendation is that Council exercises its powers conferred by Section 147 of the Planning Environment Act 1987 to enable the authorisation of a number of staff under the Planning and Environment Act, and that the instrument is signed and sealed at the appropriate stage of the meeting.
So moved.
So, yeah, seconded, whatever.
Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Janis.
As before, it's administrative. We need this in place under various legislation, and it's now going to be in place.
Councillor Janis.
Yep, just I'm pleased to note that we have now got a compliance officer on board, which is going to assist in some of those building and planning type concerns that are brought to us by members of the public to be better looked into and resolved one way or another. Thank you.
Any further to the vote? All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.3 Audit Committee meeting, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the Audit Committee meeting minutes of the meeting that was held on the 17th of July 2020. Key items that were presented to be considered by the Audit Committee at that meeting were the interim audit for the year ending 30th of June, the Local Government Act 2020 Implementation Progress Update, the Asset Management Progress Update, the Audit and Risk Committee Charter and Establishment, the VARGO report into personal security due diligence over public sector employees, and the annual self-assessment and performance. It is recommended that the minutes of the Audit Committee were received and noted, please.
So moved.
Councillor Keeble, Councillor Pearce. Any commentary?
I noticed that the fraud management survey indicated that only 50% of staff are up to date with their fraud training, I guess. I know that maybe 8 years ago, there was a lot of fraud training that went on. I guess, when will that training happen for the rest of the staff? I guess they're probably new staff in the last few years. That will happen shortly.
Yeah, we're currently undertaking procurement for training providers for that training, Councillor Keeble, and it will be rolled out the next quarter.
And just a quick question, is the fraud training annual, every couple of years? Was it on a schedule?
Yeah, we should add fraud awareness training. So it probably takes a few different functions in terms of what components you focus on through fraud awareness. The scope could be quite large. We should add that to our compliance training schedules and have a regular run through the training.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Pearce. Yep, Councillor Pearce.
No, nothing to add.
Any further, Councillor Forsyth?
Just a quick question on that. When the training actually is it also part of the orientation for new employees?
Yeah, we do have a significant induction process for new employees where we take them through our policies, our procedures, the code of conduct, and various introductions into health and safety and other things. I think this is more about targeted fraud awareness training on targeted components.
All right, so is there a general fraud training for new employees?
We wouldn't call it fraud training, so we would take training on the code of conduct, say. And the code of conduct has sections in there on fraud and on general conduct and behaviour of council officers. We also would undertake training on the procurement policy, and largely the procurement policy is one of the largest potential risks for fraud. So we undertake training on various different components, but we wouldn't call it fraud training.
Okay, so look, I compliment you initially because staff turnover has dropped considerably and therefore you're not getting that churn through of new staff. But I would have thought that it would be just wise to have that as part of the induction process for any new staff coming in future.
Yes, potentially that's a good way of addressing it as well. Once we have a provider on board, we'll be able to map that out a bit more in more detail.
Good.
Any further?
Just a quick question. Is there a component of fraud training or awareness extended to the induction of councillors?
So we are currently working through our induction processes for the new council when they come on board. And yes, in the same way, there will be training given on governance, local government governance, as well as various components of local government and where the risks in those are, and councillor code of conduct as well.
Thank you.
If there's no further, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.4, Ms. Cook, Revocation of Policies.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council is in the process of a holistic review of its policies. This report relates to the completed review of 7 policies under this review. The review of these policies have established that the Alpine Region Tourism Festival and Events Funding Policy, the conduct of street closures and markets policy, and the motor vehicle policy have all been superseded by current documented processes. The employee education policy is superseded by the Alpine Shire Council Enterprise Agreement 2016 and other associated established procedures. The competition policy is no longer required as it relates to practices which Council does not currently undertake. The communication and consultation policy is superseded by the Community Engagement Public Transparency Principles and the requirements of the Local Government Act 2020. The staff structure and recruitment policy has been superseded by a new recruitment selection and appointment policy. Therefore, it's recommended that all 7 of these policies are now revoked.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Keeble.
Yeah, straightforward in regards to the recommendation. Really, the policies that have already been rolled into other areas of the business, and you know, this sort of policy work takes a long time to sort through. There's a lot of them, so well done to Natalie and her team. That's all I've got to say on the matter, I think.
Councillor Forsyth.
Look, simply good housekeeping, and hopefully at the end of this process we'll be down to a manageable number of policies.
Any further? No to the vote? All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.5 Child Safe Policy, Ms Cook.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present to Council a review of its Child Safe Policy and seek Council's adoption of the revised policy. The Child Safe Policy establishes Council's commitment to the community to create and sustain an environment where children are safe and protected from abuse and harm. This policy was adopted in December 2017, and a review has been conducted to ensure the policy is current and consistent with Council's current policy position. It is also proposed that the requirement for a working with children check in this policy is extended to councillors, given the variety of situations in which they may be in contact with children in their role. Other than this, there are no substantive legislative amendments or other changes to the policy as it has been presented. Thank you.
Councillor Nicholas.
Second.
Councillor Keeble. Councillor Nicholas.
Just had a quick question. Would you foresee councillors would need a employee or volunteer working with children check?
That's a good question, Councillor Nicholas. I haven't specifically looked into that issue at the moment, but I will do some research on that. I would envisage it would be an employee check that will be undertaken at the expense of Council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just a comment there, Mr Mayor. From my research, it's an employee check, cost $93 for 5. I just got my new one today, but I couldn't find anything on their website that would allow for a councillor other than being an employee.
Thank you, Councillor Janice. Any further? Councillor Keeble.
Councillor Keeble here. In regards to the Child Safe Policy, and Councillor Forsyth raised it in the previous agenda item, the Child Safety Policy, is that one of the policies that's in the induction for new staff?
Absolutely. It's also one of the policies that's forwarded to all new staff prior to starting as well for acknowledgement.
Great. And to any people out there that are looking at putting their hand up for becoming councillors, you know, this child safe policy and having a working with children's check is really important. And, you know, when and if you become councillor, that's one of the things we have to think about getting, if you haven't already got one.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble. Any further? To the vote, all those in favour? Carried. 8.3.6 body worn camera policy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The purpose of this report is to recommend that Council approves of the revised body worn camera policy. Council's body worn camera policy was adopted in May 2018 with a review now required. The policy sets out the details of how councillors' authorised officers are able to use body worn cameras in the course of their duties. The changes provided to this policy are generally considered to be minor or administrative in nature. It is recommended that Council revokes the previous body worn camera policy, adopts the new one and signs and seals the policy at the appropriate time in the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Councillor Janice, Councillor Keeble. Councillor
Yeah,
Janice.
yes, thanks, Mr Mayor. we've all seen on television lately where body-worn cameras have been a great source to protect both parties involved in any disagreement. Our staff are no different in relation to that, and that's the reason we brought that policy in the first place. And we're just upgrading the policy, but the argument around wearing them remains the same, and probably is even stronger in this day and age to protect our staff.
Councillor Keeble?
No, I agree. Sensible changes, make them current. Well done.
Any further?
Just like
The
to make
vote.
the comment that they can act as a deterrent, and it reminds people to mind their P's and Q's, both sides.
Thank you, Councillor Napstone. Any further? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.7, contract for integrated library management services. Ms Cook, you've got plenty today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council manages a shared service called the Library Hub for the procurement and processing of library resources on behalf of 4 councils, being ourselves, Alpine Shire Council, the Benalla Rural City Council, Mansfield Shire Council, and the Rural City of Wangaratta. The purpose of this report is to recommend an award for a contract for the integrated library management system that supports the operations of the Library Hub and the library branches it services, which is collectively known as the High Country Library Network.
So moved.
Councillor Keeble. Councillor
Seconded.
Force.
Oh, sorry.
Councillor Keeble.
The libraries in our area, we made some great changes a few years ago, and it's been a real success story. Putting this particular contract in place will, with an additional period of 36 months, will take us up to 2030. It's a good way to go. So well done to Natalie's team, and thank all the staff in the libraries who do an amazing service across our shires, not just our shire. Thank you.
Any further? Oh, sorry, Councillor Forsyth.
Yeah, look, just a simple question. Just fill me in here, please, Ms Cook. The contract, we carry the contract because we carry the hub, I'm assuming, for the library. Do the other councils, this money that we're paying out, do they fund that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that the hub works is we are on a budget for the hub, and it includes all of the costs, all the expenses that are run through for all of the councils with regard to this procurement library service, and then that is apportioned to all the councils. So this will be paid out of the hub budget, and the councils will pay an amount toward that.
Thank you. I'm just wondering whether, because of this, whether we could take this whole process outside of the council and make it a private, I'm not sure whether we can make it a private type thing or not.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, Councillor Forsyth. Do you mean the hub itself?
Well, yeah, going back to Momentum 1, the management and the running of it, whether or not that can then be another private enterprise situation. I'm not sure whether that's possible with libraries.
I think we would have to do some research into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councillor Forsyth may answer that. It is possible. However, the current shared service arrangement we have in place is very effective and is very efficient and is serving the purpose well. So at this point, I wouldn't be recommending deviating from the current arrangement.
Not recommending deviating from it, just posing the question. Thank you.
Any further?
Can I just make an observation about the library services, and thank you to the library staff, that under the current restrictions, they provide a really good lifeline and they're doing a great job. It's been much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Napstone. Any further? We'll go to the vote. All those in favour? Carried. 8.38, annual financial statements and performance statement approval in principle. Ms Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is to present the draft financial statements and performance statement for the year ended 30 June 2020 for review and approval in principle. Section 131 of the Local Government Act 1989 requires Council to prepare an audited report for each financial year that contains a report on the operations of Council, the audited performance statements and the audited financial statements. Section 132 of the Local Government Act requires Council to pass a resolution which gives its approval in principle to the draft financial statements and draft performance statement prior to these being submitted to the auditor so that they can prepare their reports. This report provides an overview of the results of Council's draft statements, which are provided in full in the attachments to your papers. Once approved in principle, Council has incorporated any changes that are recommended or agreed to by the auditor. The financial statements and performance statement must be certified by 2 councillors who are authorised by the council prior to the auditor signing their reports. In summary, Council ended the 2019-20 year with a surplus of 7.6 million, which was 1.8 million higher than the 3.8 million budgeted surplus projected in the 19-20 annual budget. The higher result was primarily due to the receipt of $3.4 million in bushfire recovery funds, higher than expected Victorian Grants Commission funding by $300,000 and lower than anticipated road drainage and tree maintenance expenditure. This was in part offset by a pass-through of $1.1 million in bushfire recovery funding as rebated rates, fees and rents and capital grants also being $1.2 million lower than anticipated. It is noted that the impact of COVID-19 on the financials was minimal, as the majority of staff was stood down from closed services were redeployed, and the impact on council revenue streams was not considered material.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Pearce. Councillor Forsyth.
Question on this one. If we're going to authorise 2 councillors to certify these financial statements, at the moment, all we're doing is someone talking here. Sorry.
Yeah, I
Councillor
am. Normally, the mover and seconder sign.
Fine, thank you.
So you'll have to get yourself to try to sign it.
No, then my query is this: to approve in principle only at the moment the financial statements and performance statements. With the meeting today, I'm assuming that those final statements will be ready prior to the 22nd when we go into caretaker mode. Is this correct?
Yes, this is it would be what we are aiming for. Yes, Councillor Forsyth. We're largely in the hands of the auditor's report at this time.
Right. And if the financial statements and performance statements, which is in draft form at the moment, are majorly different to what we see at the moment, the final ones, are we still comfortable to authorise 2 councillors to just sign those off without coming back to council?
So we have not received any indication from the auditors to date that they're supposing any major changes to the statements. We had an audit committee meeting this morning, and it was discussed at that committee meeting that there would be a further discussion with the auditors in the next 2 weeks when that auditor's report has been put forward to discuss any changes to these statements. We have checked the legislation and there is no requirement after this meeting to bring the financial statements in principle back to the meeting.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Forsyth, are you happy with that response from Ms Cook?
Look, I am, and I was privy to that Audit and Risk Committee meeting this morning. There is another meeting of that committee on Friday the 18th, prior to the caretaker period commencing. And if there's red flags, it'll be brought up then. We've still got 2 or 3 days to sort it out if needed.
Correct. So you're also happy with the aspect of driving to Bright to sign the financial?
Not a problem. Not a problem. I'm assuming this won't happen for at least 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Yep.
Councillor Pearce, anything further to add?
No, nothing to add.
I had a question.
Councillor Napster.
Yeah, because I sit on that committee and I didn't realise. Can you sign that if you were sitting on that committee meeting?
I still believe we can.
Okay, I wasn't sure. That's why I didn't put my hand up straight away.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So you're concerned he might have had a conflict of interest, Councillor Napstein? Is that what you're saying? Because you sit on the audit committee?
I just wasn't sure. I thought being a representative on the audit committee just meant that as it was presented to council, other councillors would sign off on it because of, yeah, maybe I was reading it wrong.
Sign off on the documents. Your role is to advise us as to whether we should be or not, the comments you've been receiving from the audit committee. Any further commentary about this document, this item? All those in favour? Carried. 8.3.9, Ms. Cook. This will be an interesting one, I think. I think we're up to the planning one, which is planning application 9 to 11 Park Street, Bright.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is planning application 5, 2018, 1381.
I need to, a conflict of interest here, so I need to put into the parking lot. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble.
For the record, Mr. Mayor, he's just been put outside the virtual council chambers at 5:18 p.m.
Can somebody mute the dog?
I'm sorry, it's my dog's upstairs.
Sorry.
Can't present mute, sorry. This report relates to planning application 5, 2018, 1381, being 9 to 11 Park Street, Bright. The proposal is for a 7-lot subdivision.
Excuse me, Ms. Cook. We've actually done this the wrong way. So we need to suspend standing orders for Councillor Keeble to disappear. And note the time that he disappeared.
I'll move that.
Yep. We're happy with that? And we need to move and second that. Councillor Nicholas and second by Councillor Janice. So Tony's gone. He's gone into the waiting room that Charlie's controlling. So he's not partaking because he's got a conflict of interest. Please continue, Ms. Cook.
Thank you. This application relates to a 7-lot subdivision, which was a 5-lot subdivision, which was later amended to a 7-lot subdivision, and the creation of common property area that will contain driveway access for these proposed lots. The detail of the lots is outlined in your council reports. The application was advertised in accordance with Section 52 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987 on 2 occasions due to the amendments made to the proposal. In total, 3 objections were received. The reasons for objecting and a response to each of these objections is contained in detail in your report. However, I'll also like to note that in addition, we received a late objection late this afternoon. This has been forwarded to all councillors and we have assessed this late objection, and for completeness, we just wish to add that the application itself is for a subdivision, not for buildings within the application, and the council officer's recommendation has not changed with the provision of this late objection. Following the receipt of these submissions, a planning forum meeting was held. This was held on the 11th of August 2020. The meeting was attended by all the objectors at that time, the applicant, landowners, 6 councillors and planning department representatives. There is some significant detail in your report, which goes to the planning assessment and response to grounds of objections, as you will see. However, the conclusion is that the application is considered to be consistent with the Alpine planning scheme and should be approved for the following reasons. 1, the proposal generally meets the relevant provisions of the state and local planning policy framework, the general residential zone and the bushfire management overlay. It meets clause 53(2), 56 and 65 provisions. The proposal provides for urban infill in centrally sited locations within the township of Bright, and is considered to provide the following: an appropriate site responsive subdivision design for a variety of lot sizes in order to cater for varied residential living needs, and a positive contribution to the evolving surrounded neighbourhood character subject to specific residential design guideline conditions. It is recommended that the application is approved subject to a number of conditions which has been outlined and appendices in your report. Thank you.
So moved.
Councillor Nicholas. Seconder.
I'll second.
Councillor Janus. Councillor Forsyth, Nicholas.
There's been considerable discussion about this subdivision proposal, and including a forum where many councillors attended. There was significant concern from people in Cobden Street about whether the subdivision would be safe for their residences, and the conditions indicate that the subdivision and the creation of the internal road will be subject to stringent engineering standards, as well as geotech assessment that will provide further detail to be sure that that engineering is satisfactory. And that process will also determine whether there's a need for a traffic barrier around the road, so that people who live below the site should be well protected. The other concern was about houses standing out from that site, and the agreement to develop some residential design guidelines for the 6 lots that will be created that would be vacant by the subdivision is a great way forward to be sure that those houses are do fit in with the neighbourhood. And the other thing that's been of concern is that it's too much infill in the wrong place. This is within our medium density structure plan, and it's actually the right place to have infill. It's very close walking distance to the CBD, and I think the existing vegetation and further vegetation will create quite a little oasis in the middle of Brighton.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Janus.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I note that, look, there were a number of conditions placed on this before anything further can go ahead. I am concerned about the proximity of some of the buildings and the type of buildings that are going to be built near an operating police station, and what's that going to do to any future residents that may reside there, with some of the behaviours perhaps of some of the people that the police have to deal with from time to time. But I am heartened to hear that the developers are open to discussion with the type of building and the height of the buildings that that may go there in the future. And I understand that at this point this is only a planning application to create that area. But going forward with infill, it was firstly a 5 lot, and now we're up to 7. But I'm concerned that we're starting to lose what our towns are all about, and where are we going to start living in a suburban Melbourne somewhere, when we're looking at is buildings, and we're losing our view and our structure and the feel of our town and our community. So I understand that we have got some planning works going ahead into the future that may deal with some of these issues with community consultation, of course, but I have to deal with what I have in front of me, and the recommendation is that it does meet all of the criteria as required. I note that one objector thought there'd be a loss of a site of an historic building, or even though it's not classified as historic, I understand, but nevertheless there's a fine old building there that is being kept and is visible for the public to view as they walk past. The CFA guidelines have all been met, but I would have been a bit more comfortable if I'd seen a geotechnical report in relation to the common road that goes down there, to give me greater confidence that it is not going to impact upon the residents in behind me in Cobden Street. But I've also been advised that those residents' concerns have been addressed and that they were relatively comfortable with the outcome of what might occur as a result of those building works going ahead to protect their own property. So a lot of conditions in there. I suppose this is we have to work with what we have and not what we might think we want to see into the future at this point. And that would be unfair to any developer, because we all have to work to the rules as they are set before us. So that's all I want to say on this matter at this point, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Any further? There's no Councillor Pearce. You're on mute, Councillor Pearce.
Thanks, Ron, for your comments, and a lot of them were pretty much on the mark. I look at the area. A couple of weeks ago, I drove on a push bike from Wandillagong to Port Bunker and was amazed by the amount of housing that's been pushed in, behind, and in between, and all the way down to Port Bunker, which sort of looks a bit like South Wodonga. And with this comes one of the biggest problems is that in the street, not far from this building, there's a school, a P-12 school, which means it's two schools, so to speak. The police station, and there's an old court which has a lot of traffic and has its own privacy issues, as Ron pointed out. And then we've got the courthouse there, which is no longer a courthouse, but it's still a busy community base with actors and other events that go on at the church. And then there's another huge problem that comes with them is with a 7-lot plan to throw in there. Some of them will be 4 or 5 bedrooms, from my beliefs, and with that, with seven dwellings, you know, some of them are going to be out for rental, and some of them are going to have 4 and 5 cars that are pulling in at them. And given what I've just mentioned with the school, the police station, etc., with the traffic already in Park Street, it's a big ask. It's a big squeeze on some of the last pieces of reasonable land close into the middle of the town, where it's almost got you by the throat. It's that close into town. So I do have the concerns of all those things I've mentioned, and that's it from me.
Any further? Councillor Knapstein.
Thought long and hard about this, and I commend the staff. I understand that there's about, 51 conditions on it, and I listened to the objectors. I've driven around there, I've walked around there, and I'm just trying to get the feel of it. So notwithstanding that the recommendation is strongly for it, I would have looked on it maybe more favourably if it was a 3-lot or even stayed the 5-lot, but to cram in 7, okay, what they're going to be used for, I don't know. But then the location, close to the school, kids, traffic, and the fact that there's another little road that's going in there. It's not just a driveway, it's a little road. And I'm just trying to assimilate all of that. So that's my comment on that.
Any further? Councillor Forsyth.
Taking everything that Councillor Pearce has said, and also Councillor Knapstein, I think I'd go back to the point that if it was a 5-lot subdivision, it would have left one very large block, which would have lent itself to probably a 5 or a 6 unit development. I think the way that the developers have done this is quite sensitive to the area by making smaller but reasonable lot sizes which would lend itself to single residences. So I think it's been done with a lot of things in mind. Yeah.
Any further? If not, we'll go to the vote.
I was going to do right of reply, if I may.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Nicholas, I was going to ask if you would like a right of reply.
Thanks. To address the parking, we did get 2 more car parks put internally on the road to try and reduce the number of cars there are out on Park Street. And also there's a requirement that there's 1 car park provided on site for every 2 people that can be accommodated in a place. So there will be a lot of car parking within the development. That doesn't mean that there might not be some out on the street, but I do understand there'll be more traffic. But being so close to Bright, it'll be mostly traffic. I would assume that if they're holiday people, they'll come in and out and then walk, come in when they arrive and leave when they don't. But anyway, I'm making assumptions here. The other thing I really wanted to agree with Councillor Forsyth about the variety of the shape and size of the lots. I think it's a great opportunity to provide that variety of housing that we even have in our planning scheme as something that we're seeking. And my final point is that I understand that one of the developers is proposing to build a house for themselves in that lot. So it's not like it's a bunch of people from Melbourne or someone from Melbourne who's come up and cut it up into tiny bits and are running off with all the dough. They're actually going to be enjoying the ambience of Bright and their little oasis into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. With that, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour? All those against? So that is, it's an interesting one.
Isn't it?
It is, because I actually voted against as well too, and that's what I was chuckling about. But I have the casting vote now, and I am going to vote for the proposal, and so it's carried.
Do we call for a Division 2, please?
You can.
Up to you.
All those in favour? So Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Knapstein, Councillor Janus and Councillor Nicholas. And those against?
No, my hand was raised. Sorry, that was in error. I'm against.
Okay, we will start the process again. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Which is Councillor Janus, Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Forsyth, Councillor Roper. All those against? Councillor Pearce, Councillor Knapstein. The motion is carried. The time is, Mr. CEO, can we move to bring Councillor Keeble back in the meeting, please?
Oh,
We need to go back into standing orders when he comes in, Councillor Mayor Roper.
No, whatever. Yep. So can we let him back in again?
Well done, Tony.
Councillor Keeble's returned.
Thank you.
Resume standing orders. Councillor Nicholas votes for. A seconder for that, please. Councillor Forsyth. All those in favour, I presume is okay. Here we go. One of the last items on the agenda this evening, 9.310, planning application 5 to 69 Prince Street, Myrtleford, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report relates to planning application P 2020-64, being a 9-lot subdivision on Prince Street in Myrtleford. The proposal involves a 9-lot subdivision and works within the existing associated common property area, including the construction of extended vehicle access, 4 parallel visitor car parking spaces and landscaping. The application was advertised in accordance with Section 52 of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The notice of the application was sent to surrounding landowners and occupiers. A sign was displayed on the subject land. 3 objections were received and maintained. An objectors forum was held on Thursday, the 20th of August 2020. The matters raised in the forum have been summarised, and a detailed response to each of these objectors is contained within your papers. A planning assessment and responses to each of those grounds of objection is also covered in some detail within the papers. However, in conclusion, the application is considered to be consistent with the Alpine planning scheme and should be approved for the following reasons. 1, the proposal generally meets the provisions of the state planning, local planning policy framework in the general residential zone. Particular provisions including clause 56 being residential subdivisions, and the decision guidelines are clauses 6501 and 6502. The pattern of subdivision is suitable and respects the neighbourhood character of the area. The proposal provides for urban growth in an urban area, sited close to the centre of Myrtleford, being a location that offers good access to services. The recommendation is to approve the planning application with the conditions as are attached.
Mover and seconder, please.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Seconder,
Yeah, I second it.
Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Janice.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is it's similar, I suppose, in many ways to the previous item. However, it doesn't have the geotechnical problems that I was concerned about previously. I note the difficulty of the existing units that are there and the objection to some of the traffic movement through that narrow area that they have to go through to get to the work site down there. But I also note in the conditions that there are some strict conditions in relation to keeping the area clean and tidy and fixing any damage that's been done to there. It does fit in well with the infill area for that site. I note that the removal of rubbish going forward has been dealt with in one of the conditions, and that was something that concerned me. And also the fact that one of the objectors was concerned about viewing the loss of privacy in their backyard because of their swimming pool, etc. And that has also been addressed in the conditions. So I just recommend I vote in favour of the recommendation with the conditions that are imposed. And I think this one, as with the previous one, our governance officer will be duly employed.
Councillor Nicholas.
I just had a point of clarification about the overlooking into the existing backyard and whether that overlooking is managed under the conditions to the subdivision or under a subsequent building permit. Just to be sure that it can be managed, that's all.
Yeah, generally overlooking is managed the building permit process. At the point, as this is a subdivision application, it doesn't go to the construction of buildings on the site and the situation of buildings generally.
That there is adequate management available through the building permit process.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further? To the vote we go. All those in favour? Oh, sorry, Councillor, you're voting in favour? All those in favour? Sorry, I thought someone was asking a question. Carried. Number 9, Assembly of Councillors. Can I mover and seconder for the summary of Assembly of Councillors for August 2020?
Yep, I'll move.
Councillor Napstein, Councillor Nicholas,
Yep.
all those in
Yep.
favour? Carried. 10, general business. Councillor Pearce, have you any general business?
I'm exhausted, thanks. It's been a long Zoom session.
Councillor Janice, have you any general business?
No, thank you.
Councillor Forsyth? Councillor Nicholas?
Yes, I'd just like to comment on the consultation session that's coming up on the 3rd of September, I believe, for the shared trail to Harrietville. And fantastic that we're getting it underway, and I look forward to participating.
Yeah, lovely.
Councillor Knapstein?
Nothing from me. Thank you, everyone.
Councillor Keewell?
I have one bit of general business. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to recognise that on the 11th of August this year, that the Victorian Government commenced the Traditional Owner Settlement Act with the Taungurung people. This agreement promotes reconciliation with self-determination for the traditional owners. The settlement includes land in the Alpine Shire. I would like to congratulate the Taungurung people and the Victorian Government for their final sign-off on this historic and important settlement. If you want to learn more about the settlement, go to the justice.vic.gov.au website and look under Native Title and Taungurung. It's a good outcome, so have a look at that. And considering it's in our shire, I wanted to make people aware of that if they hadn't been reading the papers lately.
Thank you, Councillor Keeble, and that's where I saw but I couldn't remember where I'd seen it. 11 motions for which we have notice of proofs to begin, which we have none. No petitions as such yet. What we have,
Mr. Mayor, we have received a petition. Mr. Jeremy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So Council has received an electronic petition seeking Council support for an upgrade to the Bright Skate Park. Council's governance rules state that the petition must contain the names, addresses, signatures, whilst the change.org petitions contain a name and location only. So considering the current restrictions on movement and social gatherings during the COVID-19 state of emergency, Council may determine to admit this petition under these circumstances.
a mover and seconder for that recommendation.
I'll move that.
Councillor Nicholas, Councillor Pearce.
Could I read out the recommendation, recognising that you don't have it in front of you?
Yep.
So there's 4 points to it. So the recommendation is that Council receives the petition, which is requesting support for an upgrade to the Bright Skate Park as it is tabled. Notes that the electronic petition is being accepted due to the current COVID-19 restrictions. Requests that a report responding to the petition be presented to the December 2020 Ordinary Council meeting, noting that the October and the November Council meetings are restricted by caretaker period and inducting a newly elected council, and requests that the CEO advises the lead petitioner of the timeframe to consider this report.
Okay. Is there any further commentary, Councillor Nicholas?
Yep. I would just like to ask that the CEO also speaks to the lead proponent about the way other skate parks were developed in the Alpine Shire, and there was some community funding support for those as well.
CEO Charlie Bird.
Thanks, Mayor. Councillor Nicholas, I've already responded to the proponent and advised her of the way the Mount Beauty Skate Park came about and the significant work that the Mount Beauty community did to raise $15,000, which on the back of that, Council then funded a design and sought funding for that, and what a great outcome it's been for the community.
Terrific.
Thank you.
Councillor Pearce,
What are you asking me?
have you got any further to add?
No, I'm just thinking with the skate park, though, it's nice to hear that the bright one is, the wheels are in motion, the skate wheels.
I hear you. All those in favour? Carried. Documents for sealing? A mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Knapstein.
I'll sign them twice if you like.
I'm happy to. I just thought Darryl's already there.
I'll go in. Yeah.
Second vote to Councillor Pearce. All those in favour? Carried. There no further business. What's the time, Mr. CEO? 5:46, is that correct?
Yeah, just thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody. We'll close the meeting at 5:46 p.m. Good night.